years ago. But tonight, Renee just wanted Julia to shut up. Out of the three women in the room, she would classify Julia as being more of a frenemy than friend. She usually had to listen carefully to anything that Julia had to say in order to make sure that she wasn't trying to be malicious. Actually, Julia's sharp tongue reminded Renee of her older sister, Patrice. But Patrice would always apologize if she felt she'd hurt a person's feelings. Julia left Renee wondering. Since they were teens, Julia always had some negative comment or pointed out a flaw when it came to anything concerning Renee. But Julia constantly wanted everyone to rally around her and support her endeavors, but she never really wholeheartedly repaid the kindness. The only reason Renee put up with Julia was because of her half-sister, Gina Armstrong. Gina was one of the sweetest people she'd ever met, and nothing like her older sister. "I thought the list was cute," Gina said, holding up her champagne glass. Renee held up her glass as well. "Thank you, Gina. It worked for you, didn't it, girl? You're getting married tomorrow." Renee and her friends, Kara and Julia, were throwing Gina a private bridal shower in a suite at the Ritz-Carlton for just the four of them. The college roommates had thrown an extravagant co-ed shower the month before for Gina and her sexy supper club owner fiancé, Preston. Renee promised Gina that the Fantastic Four, which is what they'd called themselves back in the day, would have their own special time. Tomorrow, the nuptials would be held in the grand ballroom of the hotel. The reception afterward promised to be one for the record books, as Preston was known to throw a great party. Gina lowered her glass. "I didn't make a list." Kara and Julia laughed out loud. Renee didn't see the humor. "Okay, since you guys want to laugh, have you even thought about making a list?" she wanted to know. "All right, let's talk about what you'd put on your list. And I'm not talking about him being tall, sexy, and having a big," Renee said, before Kara cut her off by clearing her throat. "I'll have you know that those are very important features," Julia said, laughing. When none of the other women laughed at her remark, Julia turned up her lips, looked up at the ceiling, then back at Renee. "It's not like I don't go out on dates. I just haven't found the right guy," she said. "See, that's why you should make a list. Then you wouldn't have to worry about going out with the wrong guy," Renee said. "I still don't see the point," Julia said. "I've never done a list," Kara replied. "I know what I want, and I'm not compromising on it," Renee said with finality. Julia shook her head. "You would do better checking your daily horoscope." Renee gave Julia a sidelong glance and shook her head. "Why does this book bother you so much, Julia?" Gina asked. Renee was glad that Julia's sister asked that question, because she wanted to know as well. Julia was a beautiful brown-skinned woman with curly auburn hair, a heart-shaped face, and slim figure. She was a very ambitious marketing account supervisor at Vine Public Relations, a marketing firm where Renee worked using her master's degree in public relations. Recently, Julia had been diligent in obtaining her accreditation in public relations. She had never been much on dating and always ended her relationships on impulse. Renee never understood why, but it was becoming clear that her friend's argumentative ways might be the reason. Julia sat up straight on the sofa. "Because there's no such thing as a perfect man." Gina scooted to the end of her seat. "Well, why don't we just call the list Renee's Fantasy Man?" Renee didn't care what they called it, since it didn't concern them in the first place. Her preferences had changed as she grew older. When she was 15, she wanted her husband to be like Will Smith from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now, as a 20-something-year-old, she preferred the much more mature version of the popular actor. The older she got, the more looks didn't mean as much. She wanted a man of substance who was doing something with his life. Somehow, she needed to prove to Julia that she could find a man that possessed all the attributes she had written on the pages of her notebook. Renee looked at her friend. "What about you, Kara?"